Dearly Father, we thank you so much for today, and we just ask you to please just bless this meeting tonight and bless the conversation. We just ask you to direct the hospital and the service to the community. We thank you so much for the involvement in everyone, and thank you so much for all the employees that are here. And we just ask you to please bless everyone in the upcoming holiday season and bless everyone's travel. We just ask you for your blessing tonight, and in your name we pray.
Community input, I just have one. Jimmy, you want to speak from there, or you want to go there?
I'll go sure. Good evening. Shane Lee and these lawyers told this board that this board can't run this hospital. I would beg to differ. Since Ken Arterbury and myself got on this board, a year and a half, we've cleared over $10 million. With the right managers and good oversight, it can make money. 7 of you voted to lease this hospital. We will see if you can make $10 million in the next year and a half. In my opinion, that it's possible. It would have to be made. It would have made it's possible to do that, and it would have made a good. We could have made another $10 million. Would have made a good payment on bonds, but we gave all that away in the lease. Bill, whatever money you will have collected from the Gainesville Community Hospital, you will put it plus more into the partnership. You thought your troubles would be over with the leasing of all the district's operations. You'll find out your troubles just getting started. Keep in mind, you were told you're setting the district up for another bankruptcy with this lease. Some people are concerned that this hospital will shut its doors. If that happens, in my opinion, it will be because of bad patient care, not money. Mostly they are. In the last month, I've had more complaints than in the last year in any month. We voted to hire an ER manager. I'm not sure what he's doing, but he better step it up on patient care delivered. The goal seems to be 50% of patients refer to the hospital. I think this number needs to be realistic, 90%. From what I understand, we're not making the 50%. Go check neighboring hospitals. I feel Munster or Mercy to the north is making 90 to 100%. We need to do better. I've heard some of you want to blame Gaylord's Facebook post. You guys need to wake up. If the hospital was taking care of business, there wouldn't be a Facebook post. As well as myself, Mr. Arterbury, would have never run for this board. Most of the problems come from poor oversight of this board. Some of you guys may not like that I will stand here and address problems, but things don't get better if everybody just thinks everything is great and glory and nobody addresses any problems. In order to make things better, problems got to be addressed and got to be fixed. So, thank y'all.
We have approval of the minutes of the special call meeting of October 3rd.
I'll move to approve the minutes, special call meeting October 3rd.
I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second? Any further discussion on those minutes? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. And then we have approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of October 22nd. Call for a motion on that one.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from the regular meeting of October 22nd.
Darrell approves that.
Second.
And second by Lisa. Any further discussion on that one? Not all in favor of approving those minutes, say aye. Opposed, same sign. We're going to change things up a little bit here on the informational items because we got the Community Hospital Corporation report, crisis communication, which would be tab 9. If you want to go to tab 9, and we're going to have her on the phone.
Welcome to Hangouts Meet. Enter the meeting pin followed by the pound key. have joined the call, but you are the only one here.
Is that someone coming on the line?
Yeah, I'm actually trying to get hold of them real quick. We just spoke with them a minute ago.
Hello?
Good evening, this is Block.
Hello?
Good evening, it's Ann Block.
Ann? Okay, we're ready for you, Ann. Go for it.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for having me tonight. This is Ann Block. I'm VP of Marketing Communications for CHC. And what I'd like to cover tonight is crisis communications and some steps to take really in avoiding or hospital potential crisis. So the first step that you see on slide 2, I'm going to walk through each of these areas. First, one of the most important things is to brainstorm areas of potential crises, consider with your leadership team what you might be vulnerable towards, and we'll address that in a moment. And as you do so, consider some possible scenarios and responses that you might have. Some situations could be preventable. For example, patient safety issues is a minor facility repair could take care of. Other cases, you actually bring on what may be perceived as a crisis. For example, at North Texas, recent affiliation change, new leadership, etc. But in all cases, prepared as possible. So next, let's take a look at some areas of potential vulnerability. And you see the list in front of you, so I'm not going to debate with them all. But for example, in terms of cybersecurity, we have experienced that in one of our hospitals, and we've gone through that. Good thing to be at the other side. Just another example, some might need to look at adjusting for a service line or even making closure of services. Likewise, HC have dealt with this with a few of our hospitals. Making leadership changes, as I've already mentioned. And then in terms of public health issues or natural disasters, these types of crisis situations are really larger outside your hospital. But they may impact you. For example, at Baptist Hospital of Southeast Texas, they have dealt with numerous hurricanes. We had Hurricane Harvey was just a little bit over a year ago. Another area to look at, another step in the planning process is our crisis communication schemes. It's important to involve your leadership, and as you assemble a team, think also of using and involving people, departments, and subject matter experts, and perhaps even a legal person. When you think about designating a spokesperson, think of someone who is knowledgeable about all the issues that you might be dealing with. Ideally media trained, someone who overall understands and has the ability to talk to the press. As you create and work with your team, assign roles, when and how often the team will meet, and communicate with each other. Another area to consider are your communication systems. Basically, how will you monitor what is going on outside the same organization? How will you set up communications with yourself? Will you have a command center? How will you follow coverage that might be occurring as something is going on within your organization? What are people saying? So as the process goes through, or you might be managing a crisis, talk to all your stakeholders, adapt your messaging as you go in order to be as up to date, transparent, and straightforward as possibly. For example, again, Baptist Hospital in Southeast Texas, they set up a pretty sophisticated command center in dealing with party. Your next step is to create a communications plan. And so I'm referring now to slide 7, but on the top of the slide, you'll see kind of a shell of what a communications plan might look like. So identify all your audit audiences and establish a priority among those audiences, who needs to communicate with first, who needs to communicate with second, and on and on. Generally, the community would be your last audience to be informed, because when you inform the media, you are informing the public. So create your communications timeline within your plan, and also plan out for sort of the unexpected and things that could be occurring as you're determining your plan. When you arrive at some messaging, arrive at some big statements, some talking points, or frequently asked questions, pre-draft emails, letters, perhaps letters to the editor, as well as a press release. And I think it's a good idea also to keep it fluid so you can adapt for new development. Define what your communication will be. You don't need to use all of them, but what will be your primary communication channels, and what will you say, or how to utilize each channel. So I want to just now say a few words about best practices in terms of the media. Because relationships do take time and they ebb and flow over time, because media representatives themselves may change. They may have to do re-education along the way. But it's a good idea to keep relationships, good relationships with the media at all times. And I've just listed a few ways here that you can actually do this at any point in time. You could invite them over to the hospital to tour a new renovation as pertains to North Texas, or to share with them a new technology. With the media, be available, follow up when you agree to. Again, as I've mentioned, try to be transparent. Just know that if you say no comment, that is something that will likely get published, so it's best as possible to say that. When it's also good to be proactive with the media. By the time that they contact or reach out to you, they already may have part of the story, so it's good to come be ready and anticipate what their questions might be. So I just want to make a few final comments in the two slides. First, together, we have engaged through CHC Dallas-based professional relations and ISO communication firm that's excellent to help us with some of the situations I referred to earlier on. And I've listed here on the page, there's some really tough questions that rural and smaller hospitals being asked these days, based on all the challenges that we face together. And so just for example, one that's pretty frequent is, how can you explain recent financial losses? Well, here's just a kind of a possible response. It's not that simple. We're committed to keeping the hospital viable and make reimbursement cuts. You can add to that, but essentially, you would anticipate questions, pre-formulate responses, and even have support points under each response based on what the subsequent questions may be. So just as a last word, be prepared as possible. A crisis could develop, or it could be brought on, or something could develop into more of a crisis situation if it's not addressed and communicated early. No one will dive or show sympathy. Overall, state your mission, vision, and values. Tell what you can early on, and sometimes it's certainly okay to say, this is what we tell you right now. And also to keep in mind that communication is an ongoing process. Even when you have some level of crisis that goes on, it doesn't end when that situation has passed. Communication is important to continue. So I hope I've given you the highlight of some things to think about, as well as sort of a template plan that you might use or might prepare to use as you think about this a little further and even establish a communications crisis team at North Texas.
Thank you, Ann. Anyone have any questions for Ann before we let her get off the telephone here? And thank you very much. Appreciate it. Informative.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to the Chief Executive Officer report.
Where's all the sides of them stand in front of it there? So what you'll have, I apologize for some lateness in not getting this in the original board package. As you're all aware, unfortunately, Roger Bowen, our CFO, lost an adult child 2 or 3 weeks back, and I know our thoughts are all with him still. I appreciate Ken. I know I saw you there at the services, and if anyone else was there, I apologize if I did not see you there. But extremely well attended, and I just want to follow that up with saying that, unfortunately, due to that circumstance, Rogers decided that he won't be returning. He was retired at the time when we asked him to come out, and it's very understandable. He's going to be missed. I think very well respected amongst the hospital, and I think among this board as well. So we will have someone in place for Roger out of respect to that person's current job and not having folks at that facility find out about it. We were not announcing a name right now of who that person might be, but extremely experienced, has worked with Roger in the past, has Roger's blessing. So I feel we'll continue going in the same vein that we have been, but Roger will definitely obviously be missed. But due to that transition, a little bit, as you can imagine, Roger had such a hand on everything we did here. It was a little bit tougher to pull together our numbers. So we had to go back and think like Roger. And as most people can attest to, that's not easy to do. So what you have here in front of you is our volume for October. And I'll just start off the top. Admissions were down to prior year. It's something I never like saying, but there have been several factors, and we can address and point to each and every one of those things. Right off the bat, I've mentioned here in the past that our OB services, we've had a challenge due to our one of our physicians decided not to deliver babies here anymore. So there are some days of the month, roughly now, where we have to basically what we do call go into diversion for OB services. Basically, we don't want somebody showing up on an ambulance in the hospital or coming up here to have a baby or being ready to go, and us not have a physician to take care of them. So for those days, we close on the service and we let everyone know, and we have contingencies in place. We have maternal transports as well, ready to go with the care flight folks in case someone does show up. We've looked at a lot of opportunities to how do we restock that quickly. The long answer is obviously is to recruit additional folks, but that doesn't happen overnight. So with OB, what we're trying to do is find somebody that will take that call, that nighttime coverage, because our locals that are still here, Dr. White and Dr. Khan, Dry Khan, are obviously willing to be here during the day and that sort of thing, but they can't work 24/7. So the proposals we've been getting back are somewhere along the lines of like $2,700 a day for that coverage. So that's we have one more proposal to come in, and then we'll make a decision. And once again, I'm adamant there's no plan that we have to close down that service. It's such a valuable service that we have to the community, and we will get a restock and we'll keep going. But that's a big piece of it. Remember last year, I was in Arkansas at the time, and we thought we were bad with the flu until we read the news about the flu in Texas. And so the flu had already hit last year. So we don't have those types of cases, or didn't have those types of cases as well. That's a big chunk. So that's that explanation. But if you look at surgeries on the positive side, and these are accurate numbers, we went back and wrote them all down. Excuse me, did the formulas correctly, so we're comparing apples to apples. Our surgery totals were up. The overall, and you can see there's 202 to 173. Inpatients, where it shows that's down, their C-sections, which we average about 9 a month, do count as inpatient surgeries. So that would be the explanation for why those were off at 6 or so. But outpatient was really up. Pain management cases, we broke those out of the total surgeries because in the past it was all kind of lumped together. Dr. Ruffey was here at the same time last year, and that accounted for the losses there that you see compared to prior year. You'll see that our case mix index is still trending up, which means we're getting and keeping sicker patients, which means we're doing a good job of keeping folks in the community, not sending folks out. Talking about births, obviously it's down considerably to prior year due to what I mentioned earlier. ED visits, since I've been here, our ED volume has consistently been above, better than prior year, better than prior year, better than prior year, better than prior year. And even last month when it was better than prior year to the tune of about, not a ton, about 106, 108 off the top of my head here with the math, or 9.8%. So that does show that the community is getting the faith back in us and they're coming to us for the ED visits. The ED conversion rate, which is another contributor to the lower inpatient rates. So while we had more patients coming, they just weren't sick enough to be admitted. So we're going to admit people appropriately. When I talk to all our referral candidates, the outpatient doctor, the family practice doctors that are in the community, and believe me, when admissions aren't, as we're following them through the month, if they're not work, they typically run. I'm making those phone calls. Hey, is there something we've done? Is there a reason that we're not seeing these admissions? They're saying no, we're just not seeing folks. And that was actually a trend that we saw when I talked to the folks at TMC as well as some other areas. We were just down, not just us, but everyone down in just basic admissions. Let's see, observation rates are down as they have been, and that's a good thing, as I've explained in the past. That means we're admitting appropriately when they do come to the ED and they need admissions. In the past, where they might have been put in as observation and converted later. The diagnostic visits would trend with everything else we've seen. The clinic practitioner visits, you'll see is down as well, especially with the rural health clinic. We lost Dr. Coe and Dr. Pye, who was a pediatrician. She's not with us anymore. We have a recruit that's pretty close to signing with us there on that piece to pull into the pediatrician and back in the hospital. So that's good. Home health visits, you'll see the trend that it's, we don't have prior year on there, but it's consistently up again. And imaging procedures runs right along the lines with the other volumes we've seen. Once again, I'm never happy to report anything that's down that's not supposed to be down as far as the admission totals. But we know why it is, and we can address it. If it's things that we can address, if people just aren't getting sick and aren't deserving to be put in the hospital, I can't make people go to the hospital. Like I said, the ED visits were up, but they weren't sick enough to come in. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I heard on the radio the other day there are hospitals advertising that we're delivering babies on the radio. Is that right?
We do deliver babies.
Yeah.
We just, there may be some days whether it's where we don't have that full coverage, and so we'll divert those days. But we do deliver babies, yes.
just to piggyback, backing on Tom's report here, just for, let all the board members know that this past month, that, all the things that have been going on, considering the bond issues and the lease and stuff like that, the leases have been signed. The bond, about a week and a half ago, Christy and I went to the bankruptcy court in Plano, because we're coming out of bankruptcy now, and we should have that response, I guess, at the end of this week, and it looks really favorable for us. The judge was very complimentary, as were the people that were involved in that, including the Deputy Attorney General. But I just got a call from Chris Jennings tonight while here, and the bond rating was due today. They did get the bond rating calls came in. Fitch, he said, was up about 2 points or 2 spots higher than what we expected them to come to be. And he said Moody's was 1 point lower than we wanted it to be. He doesn't know really what that means yet. He said he's got to wait, and he's going to be talking to them and find out what that really means with Moody, and he'll work it all out for us so we get it. But that's what's been going on. We've been involved in conference calls throughout the week, and having to do with those bond ratings and all that. So I think all of those are completed now, but we'll wait to see what Chris has in store for us here with the rating call now. Any other questions on that?
When do you expect Chris to come back to us with that?
Well, he's tomorrow he'll find out, so we can either put an information out to the board, or we can, I don't know if there's going to be any action, but once he gets that done, we can put that information maybe at the next board meeting, or if we need to have it sooner, we can take care of it from that point too. But he said he should find out tomorrow. The next is a Chief of Staff report. Dr. Sears, anything on that?
Not very much. We did approved some re-credentialing on that, 9 reappointments, 6 initial appointments. Yeah, well, just the, I don't know if we need to mention all the reappointments, but they were all approved, and so not much other active business.
Upstairs, we have an action item to approve all those providers now in number 16. We could actually, let's wait with that. But what I wanted to ask you is that we don't have a closed session to discuss those, but you've discussed them in the medical staff, correct? And
We had
there is nothing that you
issues
would
or
want to
red
bring
flags
forward.
on any of those, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Sears about the quality committee report?
So the quality committee met on October 30th. Seems like it's been an eternity ago. But luckily there's a tab 8 where and just want to remind everybody, the purpose of that quality committee is to address those patient care issues that we may see in the hospital. We look at all the core measures, if there's patient complaints. Kim, can you refresh our memory, the proper channels to go through if you have a complaint at the hospital?
So, if I receive a phone call, I will follow up the phone call or the director, depending on the complaint. We also have a concern line that if they come through the concern line, then we will follow up. And it will go to the director or myself to follow up until we can get a closure on the complaint. And if it's a grievance per se, then we follow the regulations by CMS and the accrediting body.
So do you know like a ballpark average maybe of the proportion of ER complaints as opposed to inpatient?
As far as October, I actually went through my reports, and this is a rough estimate, but I only have documented 2 to 3, and wasn't, maybe one was related to a care issue. So as far as complaints that others are receiving, you know, I can only follow up what is directed either through the concern line, through potentially social media, if we follow up through our Facebook page and calls that I receive, or if they contact the director, just say, and so that's the only ones that I have reported currently.
Okay, I'll get back to our core measures. So we met on October 30th. I was present. Lisa was also present as far as board members. Becky was there, and so was Kim. Unfortunately, Jimmy was unable to attend the meeting. So we went through the core measures. Some of the data wasn't extracted for the month of September, but I don't believe we met in August. So we looked at some of the August data as well.
The reason September isn't there is certain measures we actually sample. And when you sample measures, you have to meet a certain threshold before they actually fall for us to be able to abstract them. So it's not that we weren't working on it, they just weren't available to be abstracted at the time that we met.
Okay. So looking down on the colonoscopies, met the benchmark there except for the month of September, the history of polyps, and I believe that was a documentation issue. It has to be documented in a certain place on the, is that correct?
So the question being, is it, how long has it been since your last colonoscopy? Less than or greater than 3 years is what they're looking for that. And I can find that documentation anywhere. And there was one case where it was greater, less than 3 years, but there was no indicator that met the requirements in order to instruct it as a documented reason.
Sorry.
But that's okay.
Okay,
Why I'm here.
so moving down to the mean time from the arrival to the emergency department to departure, 100 minutes. It should be less than 140. And then the median time from ED arrival to departure overall was 218 minutes, and it should be less than 240. So, and then looking at that sepsis, we've talked about that over and over again. It's trending upwards, but that's something I think that everybody's working on. Yes.
I'm sorry, but just to give you a little follow-up on that, we have a protocol out there that's pending. It has gone to the director chief of the emergency department, and he really wanted to look at some of the things within the protocol. So it's almost ready. It's just that he wanted to discuss further as far as something in there that, as far as fluids. And so that's the only reason that protocol has not been placed out yet.
And then moving down to the perinatal care, again, deliveries were down, but we did talk about breastfeeding, and that's just a real hard benchmark to reach. And part of the reason is some of these patient populations that we receive here at the hospital has receive assistance from WIC, and if they state that they're breastfeeding, then they don't get that assistance, so sometimes we don't get a clear picture of if they are breastfeeding or not. So that's something that, you know, needs to have to be addressed as well. So looking at patient safety, so for the whole quarter, there were no patient safety events whatsoever, which is fabulous. Mortality rates, 0 for the whole quarter as far as heart failure and pneumonia. And then blood products, no transfusion reactions whatsoever in the whole quarter. And then looking at the resuscitation for the inpatient, so there were no patient codes, so no cardiac arrests. And then in the month of September, no rapid response team was called. There was one in July, and it did not escalate to a code blue, which is what you want. That's what that rapid response team is for. 3 mortalities, and they were all DNR and comfort care in the month of September.
What was the cost of those? Can you tell us what the cost
The cause of those 3 mortalities, I don't know that information, but they were.
6 people died in the last 2 months. So
Say what?
there's 6 people passed away the last 2 months. Is what?
No, just 3, and they were all DNR, and they were all here for comfort care.
What It's showing 3 in September.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you? So one of the things that I do is every patient, as an inpatient, that I review every mortality. So there was a total of 3 mortalities for the quarter, which means of the 3 that I reviewed, all 3 of them either were a do not resuscitate or were placed on comfort care measures. So the total was 3.
None in
And
October.
um,
None in October, yeah.
so I can only present the data that's been presented to the board. So October, it's not that there wasn't any, it just hasn't been presented yet for the board.
It looks like October, it's quarter.
I see the quarters now.
Okay, yeah.
Look at it down
Yeah,
here.
no,
The
it
sheets.
looks like October, yeah.
Looks like October, because it's
Yeah.
such a light green.
We'll make our font bigger next time, so I can see that better.
Employee health, there were no bloodborne exposures, bloodborne pathogen exposures, no needle sticks. And then as far as health information, history and physical and procedure note, I think those were all a little bit, or the H&P was actually, well, they were all a little bit below benchmark. So I think Leah works with the providers to make sure that those documents are placed in the patient charts.
I'll speak to that a little bit. So we're working with our physicians to ensure they understand the importance of, the timeliness of these the EMR and documentation. But when we research these, everything's documented, but you have to close out the chart. And it's just a matter of going in and clicking on a button once you're done. And in most of these instances, where it just says, okay, done. But we have to show it as is because they haven't clicked that button yet. And you'll find specifically we made a hard push with those things, especially going to the end of October, so our numbers should get much better.
And then again, for September, the total number of ED visits were 1,273. 92 of those were admitted as inpatient. And then left without being seen patients were 0 for the month of September, so that's good. And then were the patients that left against medical advice, was that 16 out of that?
It was 16 for September
Okay.
with the entire
Out of the
quarter of
1273.
50.
So, and then we went over some of the reasons people leave against medical advice, which, there can be a variety of reasons as far as childcare maybe, or, they have somebody else they have to give care to at home. And then the radiology turnaround time for the CT, 100%, less than 24 hours. And then the CT within 60 minutes. And the ER was over the benchmark at 93%, should be greater than 90. And then infection control, there were, the observation on the hand hygiene has gone up significantly, so that's a good thing. I think Dan has done a really good job of educating everybody here in the hospital that they need to make sure they use the hand sanitizer before they go in and when they exit the room and with any patient kind of encounter. So that's going up, so that's a good thing. As far as the multi-drug resistant organisms, 1 MRSA in September, it was contracted in the community, and then 2 hospital-acquired C. diff, and that's an intestinal infection. And a lot of times that can occur not because of maybe transmission from one patient to another, but a lot of times patients that are on a lot of antibiotics contract C. diff in the hospital. Central line infections, Foley catheter infections were 0, which is great. And then the surgical site infections were all 0. And then I believe that one in August was not a surgical site infection, so after it was reviewed, it was not deemed a surgical site infection, so that's a good thing. And then employee health, there were 8 missed work days. And then if you scroll over to the right a little bit, you can see Kim tracks to see all of the different reasons people call in sick for work to make sure there's no trends, any kind of infections going on between the staff and certain departments. So nothing noted there. And I believe that's it. Now let's see a check. So the patients that qualify to be consulted to the cardiology was 0 in the month of September with CHA. Okay, And then this is the Women's Center data. So in the month of September, only 14 deliveries. C-section rate is relatively low. Most of them are repeat C-sections, only one primary C-section. No, I think there was one delivery prior to 39 weeks, and then it was no transfers, if I'm correct. I think that might be on the next page. So they're doing a good job. So, that's it. Any questions?
Yeah, the page where, shows where we're, transferring our patients. Is it not here? Patient
The
transfer
patient
page.
transfers out of the ER.
It was not included for this month.
And I know we
Jim,
went through
I will
that
get that
last
sent
month.
to the board. We're not seeing any trends that we've not seen in the past. We're doing everything we can to keep things here, but I just want to make sure that's in.
No, in the past, we've had a list of where all people
Yeah, I
got
understand
transferred
that.
to. It'd be nice to see that.
Yes, sir, we'll get that to you.
If you get a chance, email it to me this month.
We'll-
Thank you. How come we didn't show any knee replacements and hip replacements up there? It's all blank.
Second, go back to that.
That's infections.
Yeah, we don't want infections.
Yeah, we
That
want
was
that
for-
one.
That was for an infection, for those related to those, yeah.
That's all for infection, so we
Yeah.
didn't have none.
No, so actually,
Large intestine under review there.
That was a colon resection, and after it was reviewed with infection control, it was found that it was not a surgical site infection. So it potentially was a surgical site infection, and we found that it was not.
after review, they determined it was not. And the they in that situation is who's the reviewing body?
Dana, I believe,
There's
infection
certain
control.
criteria they have to follow for the NHSN reporting that's, the infection control. There's certain, you have to go from here to here to here. And based off the algorithm is the decision whether it's a surgical site infection or not.
That's what I just wanted, I just
No,
wanted
that's
to make sure.
okay. It's,
As opposed to
it's,
understand, it was reviewed according to, the, standards, and it was not determined it was a surgical site infection. But you asked about, knee and hips, and I'll just say, one of the things that, I am proud of is in that volume as far as surgeries go, our ortho he was up 38% over prior year. So I think he had 22 cases last in October for the data that I was reporting on. So his volume has grown.
We used to see it back in 2012, and we used to see how many hip replacements.
Hopefully I can get back there, but since it was a different EMR and that sort of thing, I'd like to dig and find out myself.
You guys are taking over next month.
All right.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, let's go to the number 10. Consider and approve financial statement for October 2018. 10. Lane, can you get that?
Yep, we'll put that over because
Yeah.
it's upside down.
That's going to be hard to see.
And that's going to be very hard to see.
It's even harder.
She's got the balance sheet up there first, so if you want to start with the balance sheet.
I apologize. We're going to try to figure out how to get this a little bit bigger here.
If you go view, might let you zoom.
A little bit.
You might have to put in a zoom too and then tell it, yeah, like 100 or 125 or something.
There you go.
Okay. This was a new fiscal year, so that's why you're not seeing many months like you did. I did include the previous fiscal year so that you could still reference that in your packet. So this is showing the September 30 next to the October, so you have a month-to-month comparison. So cash went up by $1 million. We did have our highest collection month in October of $3.1 million. We also had a dish payment that came in for $178,000. And in that $9 million, that includes your $882,000 of roof proceeds. That's a combined cash balance. Overall, the capital assets stayed about the same. There was a slight increase of $24,000 for some equipment that was approved and purchased. And then we had our depreciation, so that leaves us with a decrease in our net. So our total assets were $38,527,449. And then the liabilities, it shows our payroll liabilities stayed about the same. Accounts payable went up slightly, and we had some other accrued expense payables. Those are the things that we manually accrue because we know the invoice is coming in. So our liabilities went up about $415,000 for the month. Long term stayed relatively the same, except for the equity as a rollover from the fiscal year from the prior year. So our balance sheet balances, if you look at total assets versus total liabilities and equity, variance of 0. Any questions on the balance sheet? Is that big enough? Everybody? No? For the month of October, like I said, brand new month of the fiscal year, so that's why we just have October populated and everything else is 0. Total charges for the month were $10,397,000. We had deductions, which are the contractuals, for $6.9 million, and our net patient revenue before bad debt was almost $3.5 million. Our bad debt was lower this month at $268,000. We had some additional cleanup of indigent accounts that were older than the 180 days, so that contributed to that. We also had our low volume adjustment come through on several of our Medicare accounts, so that helped clean up some of those older, so what would have been self-pay balances. The tax subsidy revenue, this is the taxes that come in during the month, $182,000, and then other revenue is the rents. So the net revenue for the month is $3.4 million. Salary and wages, total labor was almost $1.6 million. Medical supplies were down slightly this month. Pharmaceuticals were down slightly. We didn't have any excessive drug cost. And other supplies was $467,000. Now that includes our inventory adjustments. We did inventory in October, so we took those adjustments during the month of October. Medical specialist fees and the purchase services. Repairs and maintenance were down slightly. We had a purchase order correction in one department for $28,000, so that's what led to that being down. Other operating expenses were right back on track. August and September were slightly elevated. So our total operating expenses were roughly $3.1 million, which left us with an operating margin of $354,000. And then when you add back, if you take out the interest and the expenses, with our operating expenses, you get a net margin of $160,000. In order to get to our EBITDA number, we have to add back our depreciation and the interest, and then our EBITDA is $494,000 on a consolidated basis. Any questions?
So, Jolene, even though I know that the service of OB has gone down because of the one doctor that do it, but it sounds like, I know that it really hasn't been a profit center anyway, but still, I know we need it, but it's not really hurting the financials at this time.
Well, right now, the case mix index was significantly higher for October, so that's what helped give us a higher revenue for the month of October. And OB is a considerable lower case mix. Your ventilator patients are high case mix index. Any severe infection, if they have multiple comorbidities, they're going to have a higher case mix index. So that's what helps play into your revenue.
counter, yeah, or those definitely
Yes,
counter
one of those.
your surgeries, kind of your inpatient surgeries, other than legal fees that are usually covered.
Any questions? Thank you.
Who's gonna do number 11, consider and approve resolution for amendment of freeze agreements for the North Texas Medical Center 457 deferred compensation plan. I'm sorry, yeah. Hey, just getting ahead here. Okay, we have the financial statement, do I have a motion to approve that? Okay, Kathleen, second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Gerald, second. Any other discussion on it? All in favor? Excuse me? Oh, we're just approving the financial statement, we're gonna get into that in just a second. Okay, so any other, no more discussion on the financial statements, all in favor of approving the financial statements, say aye.
Aye.
And, those negative, same sign. Okay, now, number 11, consider and approve the resolution for amendment and freeze, and we're gonna have someone talk.
Yes, sir. I'm Lori Friedman. I'm the
Could you come up there, please?
Oh, of course. Sure. I'm Lori Friedman. I'm the Senior VP of HR for Community Hospital Corporation. I've been here before. So what this is that currently your employees have a retirement plan. It's called the 457B governmental and a supplemental plan. Because the employees are going to be moving into a nonprofit company, they cannot continue participating in a governmental plan. Just how the government works. They will be actually joining the CHC retirement plan. So what this is doing is freezing and terminating the current governmental plan. None of your employees will have any detrimental effect whatsoever because we'll actually vest all of them 100% in the plan. So no employee will lose anything whatsoever, and then we will immediately put them into the CHC plan. And obviously, we're going to be using their seniority here that they've had with the hospital as part of the CHC plan. So this is really just because we're moving the employees from a governmental entity into a nonprofit entity.
When did we go into a for-profit?
You're not in a for-profit. You're
No, I know we're not.
Yeah.
You said they're moving into a
nonprofit.
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 Right,
Yes, sir.
okay. So you're saying we're coming out of a nonprofit?
No, sir. You're in a governmental
But people-
right now, and we're going to be moving the employees into a nonprofit entity
It's not governmental.
that's not governmental. So as part of this lease. And so that's why we're going to be terminating the governmental plan and putting them all into a nonprofit plan as part of the lease. Okay?
It'll be a transition day for day, goes in the
Yeah,
same day,
it'll
100%,
end
fully
and the
vested.
next one will pick right up, exactly. So there is no negative effect whatsoever on your employees.
So is this gonna be a better deal for the employees, or?
I mean, it's just a different deal. They're gonna be as part of the CHC plan. This plan, y'all have had for a while. You don't have that many, employees participating in it. And so, like I said, we'll be freezing them. They'll all be 100% vested in any money that has been contributed, that they've contributed, as well as what the hospital's contributed.
My question
Yes,
is,
sir.
this is gonna be better for the employees?
So our plan is different than your plan is. It has the same vesting schedule. Our plan has 1% less match than your plan does currently. But it is a very similar plan and is a very standard plan in the hospital industry.
The money will be in Fidelity.
Yes, sir.
The money will be in a Fidelity account, that's the plan structure. The system is a much more user-friendly system for the employees to get in, track their financials, the contributions they've made, the ability to move those contributions around. It's a much more user-friendly system for the employees as far as, and the accounts are Fidelity accounts. And the current plan is what?
It's a Millman THA, and with our plan, because of the size of it and so forth, there are no automatic fees associated with the plan, where there's been more automatic fees. So in some ways, it is a better plan for the employees, without a doubt.
It's a voluntary plan.
Absolutely. All these plans are voluntary.
And only about 30% of people were participating here before in the existing plan. And what I used to was
Based on fees, or they charge the employees more, but
Less.
we used to be,
In the new plan, will be less.
we used to have a couple $100,000 Fidelity, and they kept going up,
Yeah.
charged us more fees. We had to get out of it.
Yeah, with this plan, there really will be less fees for the employees than what they currently have.
further discussion? Do I have a motion to consider that resolution?
I'll make a motion, we approve the resolution.
Do I have a second? Would you, no? Okay, any other further discussion on that? Please agreement, sounds good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Let's do number 12. Consider and approve capital expenditure request for Microsoft software license.
Now, I will tackle that for us. Okay, sure.
Hi, I'm Mel Osley, the IT director here at the hospital. During assessments, could not find any proof that the software licenses have been purchased for this hospital, resulting in that cost to get them all current of $109,734.35. That originally came from TMC, notifying us when they were here and part of the hospital that they supposedly told everybody that there were no software licenses purchased. They just copied them, and so you've got to make them valid. And that apparently looked like it's been going on for about 3 years.
So in essence, pretty much all of the Microsoft, whether it's Windows or Outlook, whatever the licenses and stuff we use, we just want to make sure that we're paying for the services we're using, and that's what this is. It is a large number, and remember the last time we discussed capital, one of the things that came up was how are you going to pay for this? What are you going to forego to pay for it? So other than the $24,000 I believe that was spent last month, we had $116,000 booked for the first 2 months of the year, so October and November. So far we've only spent $24,000 of it, so that covers most of this ask. Unfortunately, like I said, this is a problem that we inherited, but like so many of those types of things, we're committed to fixing things that we have to fix, to keep us above board and legal. That's why we're doing this.
So this expenditure, how long is that good for?
That'll license your machines for the year until they run out, until they retire that particular operating system. But you've got over 200 machines running out there that has to have the license on it. There's no choice. I talked to Michael a little bit for history, and he says it has gone to budget before, but it's never come to the board as far as he was aware either. So
Does this get you on the latest version?
we'll get on the latest version with this purchase. It'll actually move to 2019 or a little bit lower if we're not comfortable with 2019.
Any further questions? Okay, we have a consider and approve capital expenditure request for Microsoft software license. Here a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Emily, do you have a second?
I'll second.
Jeff, any further discussion on this one? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, let's skip down. We're going to do 13 and 14 last, so let's go down to 15. Consider and approve a resolution regarding the December 2018 board meeting. The board meeting is would normally be in December. It would be on Christmas Eve, I believe it is, isn't it?
Yes, 24th.
So it's whether or not we want to have that on a different day or cancel the December board meeting. And, what's your pleasure? Any thoughts?
I assume we have it, Andy.
You assume we have it? When would you prefer if we have it?
17.
How many you want? That's really a stupid question to ask. How many want a board meeting?
Well, Roman
how
said
many
he'd
want some
like to
dental work
cancel it.
right now?
Yes.
He said he would like to cancel it, and I'm thinking the same thing. If you're gonna cancel it, that ain't no meeting. So I kinda see where Ken was coming from. I'd like to have it the 17th, not cancel it.
And then, I'm available the 6th. UCH is taking over December 1st. Or January 1st.
The 1st of December. So the 17th, can everyone make the 17th, if we have a board meeting on the 17th? You can. Most of you can't do it.
I may not be here.
You may not, it's 3. We got it. Okay, well, we got enough for one. That's really probably the only other, we could do.
Let's just say it's the 24th, nobody make it 17th.
I'll be there. 24th, I'm not gonna be here either. Okay, so, I hear pretty much across the board that we'll be having some that are not going to be here, but we have a quorum for 17 December. Okay. So we have to have a motion for that?
I'll make a motion, we have the December 17th.
I'll second.
Okay,
At 6 p.m.
and Jim, second. Any further discussion? All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 1, 2, how many? 2? Okay, and number 16 are consider and approve the initial appointments for, you see these, the physician Omar Nazir, Brenda Anderley, PA, Jill Furman, MP, Mary Nye, MP, Mike Luce, CRNA, Justin Smith, CRNA, and reappointments for Luana Volkamp, MD, Alvin Davis, MD, Leah Dill, DO, Robert Hine, MD, Sandra Cable, MD, Fred Moore, MD, Charles Phillips, MD, Cheryl Willis, MD, and Jeremy Reiner, MP. And Dr. Sears had said that there was nothing to report outside of the nature of those. So do I have a motion to approve those?
I'll make a motion to approve the initial appointments and reappointments as presented.
Daryl, and a second? Emily? Okay, any further discussion on those?
I'm just curious why initial appointments of these people, are they going to be working for the hospital or just doing services here?
So some of the initial appointments, if you look like the MPs, Anderley and Furman, they've been providing services here. They were on temporary privileges for nighttime call relief for the hospitals, for the hospitalists that we have. So this is just putting them, taking them off temporary privileges and putting them on the permanent privileges. CRNA, they just need additional support in the OR. The more CRNAs they have available, the easier it is for them to cover and rotate staff. Let's see, there's Dr. Or the other NP, Luz, he's, I believe, an ED provider. And once again, our ED provider, Concord, they just like having those people available so that, more people to schedule to make, when you have people that miss time or need vacation, they have somebody there to fill in that are approved.
Okay. Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion now? All in favor of approving those on the appointments for initial and repeat appointments? Oh, repeat appointments, reappointments. Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, now let's go to the 13. Consider and discuss operation transition issues and if needed, approve the administrative services agreement between the district and Gainesville Community Hospital. I'm going to take 13 and 14 because they kind of go together. And I asked Kevin to come up today because what we're really looking for here is, I don't know about you guys, but spending a lot of time on here, we want to know what the district board is going to look like. When we, obviously from 1 December on, there's a lot of things that is responsibility of the board, the district board, that has nothing to do with the hospital anymore. So Kevin's going to go over that, and then we can have some discussion.
Great. Thank you, Andy, and thank you all for having me today. Over the last, actually, I would say over about the next 45 days, you guys are going to go through a tremendous transition. You will be coming out of bankruptcy. You will be finishing and closing on the final installment of the bonds, and you will also, the lease will become effective 12/1. So during over this period of time, there's a lot of changes happening, and hopefully all of those changes will be positive changes for you for the future. I want to just go over a few things with you tonight, answer any questions that you have, hopefully kind of walk through this. So,
Sorry,
what?
the down button
The down button?
on the side.
Sorry.
May not turn
You're
it
going to
Happy?
IT, let's see what happened to this, no? Got it, thank you so much. Okay, so the first thing is that's happening is right now, CHC is in what we typically call a CHOW, that stands for change of ownership, and this is honestly, it sounds easy, this is a big, big deal. And it is a lot of work from the CHC standpoint. And the good thing is that they're carrying the ball on this part. But I want you to kind of know what in the background what's happening. So the license will be changing from the district to CHC. The provider numbers, which are both Medicare and Medicaid, will be changing. Your pharmacy license and your DEA certificate will be changing. Radiology will be changing. And honestly, I didn't put up, these are the big things. There's about 10 other things. And all of those things are things that are either licenses you hold, permits you hold, certifications that you hold, and all of those have to change as part of the change of ownership process. And CHC has been in the process of filing those applications, going through that process, and again, it's a big process, but it's all in the works right now. And I'm sure Tom Christie and his staff are you get kind of consumed in that process because it's not an easy thing to do, but they're in the middle of it. So going forward, again, I know you've been presented with all this with the lease and the operations transfer agreement, but I just wanted to talk about it really quickly. So the new operating entity will be called Gainesville Community Hospital. That is a nonprofit corporation. That is the new operator. That is the entity that will hold the license. It's the entity that will hold all the provider numbers. It's the entity that will run this hospital on a day-to-day basis going forward. That entity will have a board, and there will be 3 board members of that, 1 from the district and 2 from CHC, and Andy's been designated as the initial board member on that. If you want to change that at some point in the future, you certainly have the ability to do that, but that's the board for the joint venture right now. In addition to that, the documents have provided that the joint venture will actually appoint a hospital board, and the hospital board will have 6 members. All of those are supposed to be Cook County except for the CHC person. That's supposed to consist of at least 1 medical staff member, at least 1 senior staff member from CHC, and at least 2 people from this board who would go to sit on this hospital board member board. So one of the things that you'll be doing in the future will be having an agenda item for those 2 people from the district who would move to that. They won't move; they'll also sit on the hospital board going forward. So I guess the important thing about this is to remember, and I know this gets a little convoluted, but going forward, there's actually going to be 3 different entities. You're going to have the joint venture board, the hospital board, and then the one I didn't put up here is you guys, because you guys still meet, the district still exists, you still have responsibilities as the district, and so you're also on here. So you'll have all 3 of those going forward. A couple of things about kind of how that works. So this is the joint venture board, the Gainesville Community Hospital Board. It's responsible for the operating and the capital budget. It does strategic planning, and it selects the CEO going forward. And then you have the hospital board. And the hospital board does policies and procedures. It's going to talk about quality. It's going to talk about compliance. It's going to do all the medical staff appointments, talk about strategic planning, and it'll have a role also in helping to advise on the selection of that CEO. Now, again, the one I didn't put up here necessarily is the district boards. Let's talk about that a little bit about what the district board. I've told you this before, but in effect, going forward, you're a landlord on this board. And so one of the things that will happen is that the financials that you saw today will change pretty dramatically because you won't have hospital operations shown on those financials anymore. Emily's quality discussion will not happen at this board anymore because that's not part of what you will be doing. What you'll be talking about is several things. One is you may still get a report from Thomas, kind of what's happening generally, kind of a general overview from the hospital. But generally, you'll be talking about is there anything related to this building? You've kept some real estate, so is there anything? What are you doing with that other real estate? It's really going to be kind of a very general discussion. As a district board, you may even decide that you don't need to meet every month. That's up to you to make that decision as you go forward. But you will have a very limited role going forward, and so you're going to have to make some of those decisions as to kind of what you want to do, what kinds of things you want on the agenda, what can be dropped off the agenda. Now, the December agenda might have a number of things on it because we're still doing a little transition stuff, but by the time you get into January and February, again, your agenda is not going to look anything like it has in the past. And as I also mentioned, when you get to financials, one of the things that you saw up here was if you remember those financials you saw just a minute ago, they had September and then they had a whole bunch of zeros. Well, you're going to have September, October, and a whole bunch of zeros because all of that operating revenue and expense is going to move onto the hospital side. This is what's happening with employees. Actually, all of the employees will actually transfer to the district. I found this changed actually tonight because I realized this. The original plan was that these would transfer over January 1st. They're actually going to move them over on the 15th of December. From 12/1 to 12, this will be now the 15th of December. They're actually going to be, you're going to keep them, but they're going to be leased over to the new entity, and the new entity will reimburse you for all of the costs of those employees for that 2-week period of time that you still have them on the books. But as of the 15th, they'll all move over. They'll go on health insurance. They'll go on the retirement plan for CHC. They will all be off of you. So again, one of the things that you'll see on your books is you're going to see employment HR expenses up through 12/15, but you'll see none of those expenses after 12/15 because you will not have an employee after 12/15. This is some of the financial stuff. Again, we've talked through some of this before. The documents provide the AR is going to be used to pay current liabilities. So the current liability, CHC is going to continue to collect the AR and use that to pay the all your current vendors. So all your current liabilities, CHC will continue to just pay. The documents provide that CHC may call on you to provide some additional working capital support, not to exceed $3 million in the initial 12 months, and that's only if they need it, and they'll call on you if it turns out that they need it. There's a provision in there for an up to $7.5 million payback over 4 years, and there's a provision for this to be extended if the $7.5 million is not paid back over the 4 years, and it's basically $2.5 million over EBITDA in any actually the first $2.5 million goes to pay the 7.5, and then after that it would be split to the 50-50. One of the things that I've mentioned to people is it's going to be really important to handle the accounting for all of this right as we make this transition. So I wanted to give you a little bit of kind of an overflow, and Tom, correct me if this is different from the way you think, but basically. The AP prior to 12/1 is paid from district accounts, and after 12/1 is paid from GHC accounts. Now we have different bank accounts. Remember, the hospital is now going to have a new bank account, okay? And the district has a bank account. So these are paid from the district account. These will be paid from the joint venture account. Now, actually, though, this is from the joint venture account is paid from money that, and I'll get to this in a minute, money that's still coming in from the AR and is actually coming into the district, but is being transferred over here so that they can pay those accounts. So again, you have this kind of continue to roll. For AR services prior to 12/1 go in the district accounts, and then they're transferred over to the joint venture. AR after 12/1 can be this gets a little confusing. It still may go into the district accounts if we're billing under the district's billing number, but eventually it's going to be billed under the GHC billing number and just go into GHC accounts. One of the things that's going to happen is it's going to take a little bit of time, as I mentioned in that whole CHOW process, for you to switch those provider numbers. In fact, it could take as long as 6 months to switch those provider numbers. And so what's going to happen is that they're going to, and you won't necessarily see this, but behind the scenes, the district is going to continue to bill for every service that's provided in here. And it's going to continue to bill under the district's provider number. But that money is going to flow to the joint venture because those are services that are provided by the joint venture under the time of the joint venture. Now, as soon as all those provider accounts, those provider numbers all switch, then they'll switch and they'll start to bill under the provider numbers related to the joint venture. And that's a pretty common thing to do so that you don't have a time lag in the way money's received. Go on to the next one. I did want to mention to you the reserve powers because there are some reserve powers in the document. You are a Class B member of the joint venture, and as a Class B member, you have some authority in the joint venture, and I wanted to make sure that you know that as a board. These are things that both the Class A, which is CHC, and the Class B, which is you guys, both need to agree on. And if you can't agree, you're going to have trouble doing these things. But these are things you have to be part of. So any change in any mission or purpose of the entity and the provision of indigent care, you guys have to approve that. Any amendments to the certificate of formation of the new entity, you guys have to approve. Any amendments or additions to the certificate of formation of bylaws of any subsidiary. So if this sets up any kind of subsidiary corporation, you guys have to participate in both setting it up and also making any changes in it. If you invest in any subsidiary entity or partnership of this entity, you guys have to be parties to that and participate in it and agree to it. Any amendment, termination of the partnership agreement. So again, if you set up a subsidiary and you want to get rid of a subsidiary, you guys have to agree to that. If there's any discussion of merging this entity, the new entity, into anything, you guys have to agree to that. If there's any major expense, and that would be an expense in excess of $3 million, that would be actually this is a development campaign. So in other words, if they go out to raise money and they want to raise more than $3 million in fundraising, you guys have to approve that. Any agreement that would have a negative effect on the district's ability to do its either statutory or constitutional obligations, or any agreement that would affect the district's indigent care obligation, you guys have to agree to. Any agreement under the bond, anything that would have any materially negative effect on either the bond rating or the bonds, you guys have to agree to. So the important thing about this is a CHC in its management role can't take any action that would negatively affect the bonds, your ability to pay the bonds, any of that, without you guys saying yay to it. So going forward, this is where we are. You don't have any responsibility for hospital operations going forward. But you continue to own this building, and you continue to own other realty, and you guys have had that discussion. You continue to be responsible for the bond debt, and for although I said for the cost of indigent care, but actually you have transferred indigent care. You're responsible for the cost, but you've transferred the indigent care responsibility to CHC, so CHC is taking care of the indigent care responsibility. Going forward, you'll have a new agenda, you'll have new financials that every month presented to you. Again, I think you'll find the look of your meeting and the look of the information you receive will be very different than what you have historically gotten. So that takes us to the end. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Again, the timing is 12/1. The transfer occurs. The new entity is in place and working as of 12/1.
Could you talk a little bit about the providers?
The providers. Thank you. The providers will also stay with the district for a certain period of time, and that's undetermined right now. That again may be as long as 6 months. And similarly, to the extent there's costs with respect to that, those costs will be reimbursed back to you from the new joint venture entity. And the reason for that is that it takes a very long time when you have a provider, a physician, and you take them and move them from one provider number to a new provider number, which is the providers have to go through a chow too, and that is again a long, complicated process, and part of what you're doing is changing them not only from a Medicare Medicaid standpoint, but you're also changing them on individual payer contracts. So like Blue Cross, Aetna, United, all of those contracts have to change, and that process takes time. It is extraordinarily time consuming. And so what we're trying to do is keep them on the existing contracts so that there's no gap in the billing process. And then as soon as they're enrolled and from the new entity, then we'll move them all over. I think the good thing about this, both on the hospital side and on the provider side, is we've made every effort to make sure there's not a cash flow lag. I can't promise you that's not going to happen. I wish I could. But I think we've done everything we can to try to make sure that doesn't happen, and you have consistent cash flow through this whole process. Tom, you want to add anything to that?
No, the only thing I can think of is, we've got the money where we're working on the roof, and we've gotten like the first draw, they're actually working now, obviously not there now, but they're working now, so I think, we've got the check for like $189,000 of the 500 and some change. Those sorts of things, that's obviously a commitment that was made prior to, even though the bank account might change, that's something the district still will fund through that insurance settlement.
And there are a couple of quirky things like that. I'll tell you, today I had an hour-long discussion with the insurance people about making sure that your insurance coverages are all going to change. And so we're trying to make sure, again, that we don't have any kind of gap in your insurance coverages. CHC is taking on a lot of that, and some of it we're changing to put you on an additional insured on a CHC policy. Some of your coverages will stay in place. Your D&O coverage will stay in place. Your general liability coverage will stay in place because you still own property in different places. Some of the property coverages will still stay in place. So we're having to walk through each one of those and figure out which one stays, which one goes to CHC, and plan those in a way that we don't get a gap in any way at all.
What's the D&O?
Directors and officers. It's the coverage that covers you in case you do something inappropriate.
One of the things that I talked with Kevin about these last 2 weeks is in this transfer over to the district, I think that, and it doesn't have to be me, I've got some time on my hands, but I think that as we transfer that we're, it's, as I view that, we've actually got a district, our district board continues to stay intact with district responsibilities, even though they're different. And then there's, of course, the joint venture, which we will have a little to do with, and that's mostly all CHC and GCH doing that. But my concern, my big concern right now is the district. And I'm taking on that head of just trying to focus on, okay, what is our role? Where is our accountability? What is our responsibility to make sure that, like, funds that get transferred into the district funds are accounted for, and funds that may have to go out are accounted for. And not that I don't trust CHC, I trust them implicitly, but we have to have some eyes on the ground. We have to have that as we're going through that, so we understand. Because how are we going to be able to understand as a board going forward what is our role unless we actually get intimately involved in that? Like I said, I'll do that. I'll do it anyway because it's simple. I need to know. I want to know. I want to know. That's for me. But if there's anyone that would be willing to take on that either with me or instead, I mean, I'm fine. It's just I think it's just going to take an understanding of knowing how the district board functions, and that we're going to have to work through a lot of that.
Is BKD still doing their quarterly audit?
Actually, that's a good point, though, Rob. I want to have there is an item on the agenda for Andy to have this kind of continuing meeting through this transition process, and I would encourage you to do that because I think it's really important for the district to have a designated person who deals with CHC as we go through this transition process, because there's going to be some issues that are going to come up that they may need to turn to somebody, and it would be good if the board had said Andy's the person who's the designated person in this. Then on the BKD piece, my suggestion to you would be that we bring BK, they're under contract already, and so I don't think this needs a board approval, but I do hope there'd be some consensus to this, is that the first couple of months in working out the new financials for the district are going to be a little challenging as to what comes off, what goes on, what shifts, and frankly, I would feel more comfortable if BKD was working with CHC staff to make sure that we started those financials off in the right way, because ultimately they have to do the audit. And I'd rather they help start it off now as opposed to come back when they do the audit and say, you should have done these 10 things. It just will make a lot more sense to me if they're actively involved in it now.
Because we need somebody on behalf of the district to be able to look, this is what was in the account on the day that we did the separation, and then we're paying money for these doctors or providers, and they're being reimbursed. We need somebody to make sure that what we paid out is also being reimbursed.
Yes, and I'm honestly, to be honest with you, I trust CHC in this process, and so I don't have as much concern about kind of the oversight as I do about the structure piece, because I think the structure piece is going to be really important for somebody to be on the district side to be able to say, that should show on the district's books, this should show on the hospital books, and we need to make sure that we're doing that in the right way.
You gotta have something in place, number fallouts, and it's gonna get overlooked.
I think Danielle from BKD would be a good resource, and I can reach out to her. She's helping with the audit. She's not on site right now. They're in-house this week doing the fiscal year audit. But she would be a good resource to say, once we've opened those accounts on the district books, and have her review that at the month close to say, yes, this is appropriate.
And
She's
And,
very good.
And in follow-up to that what I'd like to, if it's okay with you, is what I'd like to do is call Chris Clark, who's your partner on the audit, and tell Chris that this is something we specifically want to make sure that he makes sure BKD does. So there's somebody from, that level.
So as of 12/1, as this money's going back and forth between the district and CHC, who's gonna be managing that bank account at that time?
Well, CHC's always managed your bank accounts.
I understand.
And so they're gonna continue to manage your bank accounts. But that's, Jimmy, your point is, mine is exactly what you're talking about, is if somebody from BKD, who's yours, is watching over that stuff, making sure that it's done right.
Somebody needs to.
So, any other questions for Kevin? Something where it's exciting, it's terrifying, but it's and let me just kind of end that with, I know, Jimmy, you've got a lot of concerns. You spoke them out in the public comments today, and so I'm not going to put you on the spot. But I want to address some of those concerns because you made mention that since you and Kim got on the board, we've been having positive. Well, the truth of the matter is, we've been having positive whether you go with us or against us. Because of the fact that we're all trying to do this right. We're all trying to do this right, and we believe that CHC coming in here is the right path. Our lawyers tell us everywhere, the people who are in the know, who know this kind of business, know this is the right way to go. And so I know it's hard for some to swallow. It's hard to give up that control. But the truth of the matter is, we want healthcare to remain in this area. This is the route we have to go. I believe it is, and I think most of you do. And I wish that all of us, would uniformly would believe that. But I think we'll just have to wait, and the proof is in the pudding. And we know that, and we believe that. And I think we've got a good group here, and I want to welcome you guys, I guess officially, I know 12/1 is going to be the official date, but we signed the papers, so it's we got a done deal going forward. It's just working out some of the things. There is a part of here on one of these called the transfer agreement, the hospital operation transfer agreement. You want to talk a little bit about that? I don't think we're ready to sign anything like that because I think we've got some questions on that. You're involved in that though, right? I mean, I know you are.
I've looked at some of that, and I think you're very close. I think they were making some final tweaks to that, and there have been multiple agreements in this process, but that's the agreement that actually describes kind of the I guess more the detail of all the little things that have to happen as the operations transfer over, and that includes some of the money stuff that we talked about, the $7.5 million, the working capital, some of those kinds of things are all in that operations transfer.
Yeah, it's all part of we're going to. Our desire is to actually to rent space here and to rent the services of someone to do it, as opposed to get.
Oh, you were talking about the services.
Yeah, right. Well,
Yeah. Let me mention the services agreement real quick because I do think this is an important piece. You don't have an employee going forward. Christy's going with Christy and everybody else, or end up with CHC, and so you need some way to operate the district. You have to have financials done. You still, again, as I said, you still own property other places. At some point, you're going to have another election. You have to have a budget. You have to set tax rate. You've got a lot of things you still are going to do. There's two ways to do this. What some districts do when they become what I call legacy districts, which is exactly what you are. Sometimes they hire a full-time or a part-time person. They have an office somewhere, and they operate the district with one or two people. The other thing you can do is contract for those services. Initially, you're going to contract. The plan is to have you contract for those services, and that's what the services agreement does. Now, in the future, if you decide you want to do this in a different way, do whatever you want. It's there's no right way, there's no wrong way to do this. And so, if you decide to hire somebody, even if initially CHC is going to designate an office here for you, Tom's going to set aside a space that's going to be the district office within this building. Later, if you decide that doesn't work for you and you want to move your office to one of the other buildings you own, feel free. Do that. Put an employee there. Again, do this in the best way that suits you. But initially, under this services agreement, there's a whole list of things that CHC is going to provide for you. They're going to do your regular monthly financials. They'll help with your annual audit. They'll do your agendas for your meetings. They'll do the minutes for your meetings. The agreement is pretty comprehensive. It basically will do all of the things that you need to have done to continue to operate as a district. What CHC has proposed, and Jim can talk about this in a minute, is that basically what will happen is if it's Christie or whoever does it will keep track of their time, and they will bill you for the time of the person who's involved in providing that service on an actual cost basis, plus 15%. That is, I will say, that's not an unusual thing to have a small. Any management company is going to have some kind of add-on to the cost, so that's not necessarily an unusual thing. That's the proposal. In addition, there's a relatively modest proposal for the rental of the space here, because you're actually renting back space so that you have space in here to use. And what we'll do,
Just so that amount is $160 a month. Again, the intent behind this is if you want people in the hospital that have been doing these things for you to continue to do those things for you, we want them to be available to do things for you. We just have to have something that allows it to happen legally. The structure we put in place, he pretty much just hit on it. It's whatever the cost of the people doing it. It's a straight pass-through with a 15% markup, and then the rent is $160. But again, that's at your discretion. I mean, we're doing that because it's who's been doing it for you up to this point, and if you want to continue that, we'll continue to provide that as long as you want. If you want to do something different, we're fine with that as well.
and my suggestion is you run this 6 months and see if you're happy with it. And if you want to do something different after 6 months, do something different.
So Jim, if you bring somebody else in, you allow the current staff to work with that person and bring them up to speed and help train.
And there's no non-compete with respect to Christie, so. I'm not saying anything, Tom.
we may have to have words now. That's what I was talking about. I used the wrong word.
No, that's no problem. So at some point, you do have to approve that agreement. So.
Well, I would like to thank Andy for pitching his hat into that arena, because it's going to take a lot of time, especially in the next month or two, and he's offered his free time for that. So I want to thank you for putting your hat in. I definitely support you.
I tell you, I'm going to do it, but if somebody would rather do it, I would gladly put aside. It's just going to take a lot of time, because we have to be able to understand and know how our district's going to function. And so,
Kevin, do we need a resolution on that? Do we need to vote on that?
I think that it's on the agenda.
Yes.
So I think it'd be a good idea to do that so that Andy, that gives Andy the authority that the board has said you're the designated person.
13 is the
13 is
Administrative service agreement.
Yeah, and then 14 is number 14 is that.
We need to approve the administrative agreement.
Approve the administrative service.
Well,
Yeah, and if you're okay with it, the only reason we were a little hesitant on the administrative service agreement tonight is we didn't know the fee. But we worked at the fee today, and so if you're comfortable with the actual cost plus 15%, you can go ahead and approve that tonight. We'll plug in the number and we're done.
The legal fees calculating that were more than the monthly fees. That's because they tried to steal Christie. So we've got 13. Consider and discuss operations transition issues, and if needed, approve the administrative services agreement between the district and Gainesville Community Hospital. Do you have a motion on that?
A motion that we approve the administrative services agreement based on the fees that Jim and Kevin discussed.
Okay.
I'll second.
You second. Okay. Any further discussion on that one, number 13?
Andy, I got a short statement on that.
Yep.
GCH is asking GHD to compensate them for their services that they will provide for us. You haven't listed what they will be. I would assume that GCH would provide those services at little or no charge to GHD. Since GHD board is letting GCH have the inventory supplies valued at roughly $650,000 and the accounts receivable valued a little over $3 million at this time. Since we are a partnership, GHD cannot charge GCH interest on those values that GCH is borrowing for up to 5 years. If we could, that would be worth at least 6% per year on interest charges. Since the amount of compensation has been left blank, I think a monthly charge would be worth about $5,000 per month or less for those services. Some of those services could be considered part-time.
got a motion, second, we've got some discussion on it, do you want to continue that discussion? Address the discussion? All in favor is as written, cost plus 15%, say aye. Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
2. Number 14, consider approve if applicable, the president of the board to meet with the Community Hospital Corporation, Gainesville Community Hospital on a regular basis to receive information on issues related to the transfer of hospital operations and assets pursuant to the hospital operation transfer agreement and facility and equipment lease. Just say, if the board is acceptable to wanting me to do that, I will do it. If so, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
I'm just curious what decisions will be made.
There,
You know, I think any decisions to be made ought to be brought back to the board.
I agree with you fully, Jim. This is not for me to make decisions, it's for me to learn, so I can bring back to the board and educate the rest of the board on what the district looks like. It's not for decision making, you know, but rather for learning. Right.
Well, as you go through this, I would appreciate if we could get an email, just kind of keep us up to date when you have a meeting, let us know what's happening.
I would be glad to do that. I'm a little touchy on email, but just don't email the reply to all, and we won't be accused of having a board meeting, okay? But that's the only reason I don't email you all now, is because of that. I delete everything that comes to me. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say, on 14, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, number 17.
I'm moving to adjourn.
Okay, we got a motion. How about a second? Emily? And I guess there's no discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Have a good holidays. We'll see you on the 17th.
No.